In your supplement at figure A2, we have a good place to start talking about cubism. We have some clearer examples of cubism to start looking at. I introduced cubism to you briefly a few minutes ago. Cubism means presenting the same object at different angles. At figure 8.2 in your supplement, you have George Braque's violin with palette. We can make out the pieces of the painting. Excuse me. You see the palette up here, the round board that holds paint for the painter to use. Here we see some musical scores. Down here we see a violin. The violin looks strange to us, but it doesn't take us long to figure out what's strange about the violin. The different parts of the violin are presented at different angles. It's like the artist starts off with the strings heading in this direction, and then the artist turns the violin, and now the strings head off in this direction. And then the whole violin is rotated, and we see the scroll of the violin from the side. Now, what's the big deal here? Well, in an art history course, you might talk about all kinds of different things going on with Cubism. But from this course's perspective, the perspective of cultural history, where we take artifacts and try to figure out how to connect them to what's going on in the broader culture, what the big deal here is may not seem like a big deal at all at first. But if you ask Braque, what does a violin look like? He reminds us that it depends on how you look at it, that there's not one answer to the question. He reminds us, and he's right, that the answer to the question, what does a violin look like? Well, it depends on how you look at it. And if that doesn't seem like a big deal at first, that uncertainty, that refusal to give one answer is all over the culture. Everywhere we look, at this time period, we see the outbreak of this uncertainty, this unwillingness to give an answer to a question. If this were a course in the history of ethics, the study of moral behavior, at this point we'd be talking about an ethical theory that develops right at this time point called moral relativism. If you ask a moral relativist, is such a behavior right or wrong? The answer you get is, well, it depends on how you look at it. It depends on how that behavior relates to a set of values you've chosen for yourself. That there is no such thing as right or wrong. That there's no one answer to the question, is it right for me to do this or not? Well, it depends on how you look at it. There's no such thing as truth or falsehood. There's no such thing as right or wrong. Everything relates to relativism. See, everything is right or wrong depending on how it relates to a set of values you've chosen for yourself. And since everybody chooses different values for themselves, there's no such thing as right or wrong that applies to everybody. If this were a course in the history of science, at this point we'd be spending a lot of time talking about physics. Physics is one of the big happening areas of science right at the start of the modern period. We'd be talking about Albert Einstein, you've heard of him before, and the theory of relativity. If you ask Einstein, what does the physical universe look like? He says, well, it depends on how you look at it. That there's no true statement about the physical universe that can be made without an accompanying statement stating the conditions under which the universe is being observed. The conditions under which it's being observed. In other words, it depends on how you look at it. Most famously, how fast an observer travels when one is observing the physical universe. The closer one approaches the speed of light, according to Einstein at least, the physical universe begins to do all kinds of strange things. Because it depends on how you look at it. There's no true statements you can make about the physical universe without including a statement about the conditions under which it's being observed. And that kind of uncertainty, that refusal to give an answer, is all over the culture. At figure A3 in your supplement, you have another painting by Picasso. It's a portrait of a man. The pieces of the man are taken apart and put together at all kinds of different angles. If you ask Picasso, what is this man like, what answer do you get? Well, it depends on how you look at him. Think back with me to Hans Holbein's portrait of Henry VIII that we looked at when we talked about the Northern Renaissance. If you ask Holbein, what is Henry VIII like, you get an answer. Solid, dependable, reliable. If you ask Picasso what this man is like, you get a shrug of the shoulders, and, well, it depends on how you look at him. And this anxiety, this uncertainty, this refusal to give one solid answer to a question is one of the responses to this cultural crisis.